A desperate cry pierces the scorching winds of Broken Mesa, 1876. Clara Hayes, a 26-year-old interpreter, flees barefoot, her silver amulet glinting with secrets. Hunted by ruthless bounty hunters, she carries a truth that could ignite a war or end one. As hoofbeats close in, a shadowy warrior leaps from the cliffs, defying death to stand between her and fate. Will Clara outrun the lies threatening the desert's heart, or will the Mesa claim her story? Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and unravel the mystery of the amulet. Why does the wind whisper her name? Stay until the end. The truth will leave you breathless. The sun clawed at Broken Mesa, New Mexico, 1876, scorching the cracked earth until it shimmered like a fever dream. Dust swirled in the hot wind, stinging Clara Hayes' eyes as she ran, barefoot and breathless, across the jagged red stone. Her dark blonde hair, matted with sweat, whipped against her face. The silver amulet, her mother's only legacy, bounced on her chest, its faint jingle drowned by the thunder of hooves behind her. Clara, 26, an interpreter for the railroad survey crew, wasn't running from guilt. She ran because she'd seen too much, knew too much, and the truth she carried could burn the desert to ash. Her lungs screamed, each breath a knife twisting in her ribs. Sharp rocks tore at her soles, leaving smears of blood in her wake. She'd lost her boots an hour ago, one snagged in a crevice, the other abandoned when it slowed her down. The canyon walls loomed, their red faces pitted like ancient skulls, closing in as the path narrowed. Clara's green eyes darted for an escape, but Broken Mesa, called Nerach Qua Megio by the Apache, was a maze of echoes and dead ends. Every step felt like the land itself was conspiring to trap her. Behind her, the Rawlins brothers, Silas, Amos, and Caleb, rode like demons loosed from hell. Their laughter, sharp and cruel, ricocheted off the cliffs, multiplied by the mesa's strange acoustics. "Ain't nowhere left to run, girl," Silas bellowed, his voice a whip crack in the August heat. The eldest Rawlins, a scar-faced giant with eyes like flint, spurred his horse harder. His brothers whooped, their rifles glinting under the merciless sun. They weren't after a bounty. They hunted Clara because she'd overheard their lie, a falsified map blaming the Apache for a massacre they'd committed, a slaughter of a Navajo family to steal a spring's clear water. 2 days ago, in a dusty tent at the survey camp, Clara had translated talks between the crew and an army officer. The map Silas slid across the table was crude, inked with false trails and bloodied accusations. But Clara had seen the truth in the sand. Bodies of Navajo elders, women, children, left to rot near a spring the Rawlins brothers now claimed. She'd slipped away that night, praying to reach Larkspur's trading post, where someone, anyone, might listen. But Silas had eyes like a vulture. He'd caught her scent by dawn. Now her legs burned, muscles begging to collapse. The canyon tightened, a throat of stone swallowing her whole. Clara's mind raced, replaying Silas's words from the tent. "That map'll have the army clearing out them Apache by winter. Ain't no one asking questions when the savages are gone." If she died, that lie would spark a war, and the desert would drink more blood than it could hold. Her only hope was the open plain beyond the mesa, where Larkspur's folk might shield her. But the plain was miles off, and the Rawlins brothers were closing fast. "Stop running and I'll make it quick!" Silas roared. Closer now, his horse's breath a hot gust on the wind. Clara didn't look back. Looking back meant seeing how near death was, and that would freeze her legs. She ducked under a low overhang, thorns of mesquite snagging her cotton dress, tearing it to rags. Blood trickled down her thigh, mixing with sweat and dust. The amulet burned against her skin, as if urging her to keep moving. "Mother, help me," she thought, though Elizabeth Hayes had vanished when Clara was 6, leaving only that silver relic and no answers. The canyon twisted, splitting into 3 dark mouths. Clara chose the left, her feet slipping on loose gravel. The echoes played tricks. Hooves seemed to come from everywhere, Silas's voice bouncing like a ghost's. "She's done for," Amos cackled, his younger voice high and wild. Clara's heart hammered, her vision blurring. The path sloped upward, then stopped. A sheer wall of red sandstone rose before her, too steep to climb, too smooth to grip. A dead end. She spun, chest heaving, back pressed to the cool stone. The Rollins brothers slowed their horses, blocking the only way out. Silas dismounted, boots crunching gravel, his shadow long and crooked in the fading light. His scar twitched as he grinned, a predator savoring the kill. "You ran good, girl," he said, voice low, almost soft. But nobody outrunned Silas Rollins. Clara's fingers clutched the amulet, her pulse a war drum. She opened her mouth to speak, to beg, to curse, anything to buy time. Then a scream tore through the air, not hers, not human, but a hawk's cry forged from fury. High above, on a jagged ledge, a figure moved against the sun. A man, a horse, a streak of motion. He leaped, horse and rider parting midair, plummeting toward the earth like a bolt of lightning cast by the Mesa itself. The air still trembled with the hawk's cry as dust settled around the figure who'd fallen from the sky. Clara Hayes pressed her back against the sandstone wall, her bloodied feet numb, her heart pounding like a war drum. The Rollins brothers froze, their horses snorting, as the stranger rose from the crimson earth of Broken Mesa, 1876. He stood between Clara and her hunters, a lean silhouette against the dying sun, his presence as unyielding as the cliffs themselves. Colon, an Apache warrior of the Walker Between Winds lineage, was no taller than Silas Rollins, but his stillness carried a weight that made the bounty hunter's bulk seem frail. His black hair, tied with a leather cord, gleamed like raven feathers, and his eyes, sharp as obsidian, locked onto Silas with the focus of a predator. His cotton shirt and buckskin pants bore the dust of a long ride, a bandolier of bullets slung across his chest. A rifle rested in one hand, a bone-handled knife sheathed at his hip. The Mesa seemed to breathe with him, its wens curling around his boots, as if claiming him as its own. Silas recovered first, his scar twitching as he spat into the dirt. "You're a long way from your kind, savage," he growled, hand inching toward his revolver. "This ain't your fight." Colon's gaze didn't waver, but his eyes flicked briefly to Clara, catching the glint of her silver amulet. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, not chance. "The wind hides no cowards," he said, voice low, resonating like a stone dropped in a canyon. "Leave, or the Mesa buries you." Clara's breath caught. The amulet, her mother's only gift, had always been a mystery, its Apache symbols worn smooth by time. She'd never questioned its weight until now, under Colon's stare. Amos, the youngest Rollins, laughed, high and nervous, but Caleb, wiry and mean, raised his rifle. Colon was faster, his own weapon snapping up, barrel steady. 3 against 1, Silas sneered, but doubt crept into his voice, a crack in his bravado. The Mesa's echoes twisted their words, making it sound like a dozen voices mocked them from the shadows. Colon stepped forward, deliberate, forcing the brothers' horses to shy back. "Go," he said, each word a hammer on anvil. Silas hesitated, then cursed, yanking his reins. "We'll find you, girl," he spat at Clara, his brothers wheeling their mounts to follow. Hooves churned dust as they retreated, their threat swallowed by the canyon's throat. Clara's legs buckled, but Colon's hand caught her elbow, steady as stone. "Move," he said, not unkindly, pulling her toward a crevice hidden in the cliff's face, a slit so narrow it seemed to breathe. The passage was cool, dark, the air heavy with the scent of damp rock. Clara stumbled, her torn feet protesting, but Colin's grip kept her upright. The crevice widened into a chamber, the cracked wind cave, its walls shimmering with mineral veins, a spring gurgling in its heart. Dried herbs hung from natural shelves, their faint aroma mingling with earth. Colin released her, checking the entrance, his silhouette sharp against the dim light filtering from above. "Safe, for now," he said, turning to her. "Who gave you that amulet?" Clara's hand closed around the silver, warm from her skin. "My mother, Elizabeth Hayes. She left it when I was 6, never said why." Her voice cracked, raw from fear and dust. Colin's eyes narrowed, studying her like a map. "Sahi Digne," he murmured, the name a prayer. "She saved my mother 20 years back when fever took our camp. That amulet is her mark, a debt my people honor." Clara's mind reeled. Her mother, a healer, a bridge between worlds? The woman she barely remembered had tied her to this warrior, this moment. "Speak," Colin said, kneeling by the spring, filling a leather flask. "Why do they hunt you?" Clara sank to the cave floor, the cold stone soothing her wounds. Words spilled out. The falsified map, the Navajo family's slaughter, the Rollins brothers' plan to blame the Apache and seize the spring. "If I die," she whispered, "their lie wins. The army will burn your lands." Colin's jaw tightened, but he nodded, as if the Mesa had whispered this treachery before. A faint crunch echoed from the crevice, boots on gravel. Colin's head snapped up, hand on his knife. "They've brought a tracker," he said, voice ablade. "Check, a Tonkawa exile. He reads the land better than most." Clara's stomach twisted. The cave, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Colin moved to the entrance, gesturing for silence. The wind carried a low curse, then another step, closer. Clara clutched the amulet, its edges biting her palm. Colin's eyes met hers, a silent command. "Stay strong." The cave's echoes stirred, as if the ancestors themselves were waking to guard their own. The ancestors' whispers seemed to linger in the cracked wind cave, their echoes curling like smoke as Colin tensed at the entrance, his knife a glint of bone in the dim light. Clara Hayes clutched her silver amulet, its edges sharp against her palm, her bloodied feet throbbing on the cold stone of Broken Mesa, 1876. The faint crunch of boots outside grew louder, deliberate, a predator stalking through the dark. Check, the Tonkawa tracker, moved like a shadow born of the desert. Exiled by his own people, his eyes were said to read the earth's secrets. Every snapped twig, every scuff in the sand. Colin had warned of his skill, and now Tsek was here, drawn by the faint trail of Clara's blood and Colin's haste. The cave's air thickened, heavy with the scent of damp rock and crushed herbs, as Colin gestured for Clara to retreat behind a stalagmite. Her heart hammered, but she obeyed, crouching low, her ragged dress blending with the shadows. Colin melted into a crevice near the entrance, his breathing silent, his body part of the cave itself. Clara's eyes strained, catching the flicker of Jack's silhouette as he slipped inside, his knife a cruel curve of steel. The tracker paused, head cocked, listening to the cave's deceptive echoes. "I smell you, Apache," he rasped, voice like gravel underfoot. "And the girl's fear." Clara's stomach twisted, but she bit her lip, willing her trembling to stop. Czech advanced, his boots scraping softly, each step a countdown. Colin struck first, lunging from the dark, his knife slashing for Czech's arm. The tracker spun, parrying with his own blade, and the clash of steel rang sharp, swallowed by the cave's depths. They grappled, two wolves in a dance of death, their shadows twisting on the shimmering walls. Kolan's strength was fierce, but Sek was cunning, his blade nicking Kolan's side, drawing a hiss of pain. Blood bloomed dark on Kolan's shirt, and Clara's breath caught. She saw him falter, just for a heartbeat. Czech sensed it too. He drove forward, slamming Kolan against a rock pillar, the impact echoing like a gunshot. Clara's mind screamed to run, to hide, but her body moved before thought could stop it. Czech's back was to her, his hands closing around Kolan's throat. She scrabbled in the dirt, fingers closing on a jagged stone knife Kolan had dropped. Her pulse roared as she surged forward, no plan, only instinct. The blade sank into Sek's shoulder, a sickening jolt through her arm. He roared, releasing Kolan and whirling on her, his eyes wild with pain. Clara stumbled back, the knife slipping from her shaking hands. Czech lunged, one hand clawing for her throat, his blood slick on her skin. Kolan, gasping, drove his shoulder into Czech's chest, sending the tracker crashing against the cave wall. "Go!" Kolan barked at Clara, his voice raw but firm. She scrambled toward the spring, heart pounding, as Kolan and Czech traded blows, their grunts and curses filling the air. Czech, weakened, slashed wildly, then bolted for the crevice, his wounded shoulder slowing him. "This ain't over," he spat, vanishing into the dark. Kolan slumped against the wall, blood seeping through his fingers as he pressed his side. Clara rushed to him, tearing a strip from her dress to bind the wound. "You're hurt," she whispered, hand steady despite her fear. Kolan's eyes, sharp even in pain, met hers. "You fought," he said, not a question but a fact, his voice carrying a grudging respect. Clara swallowed, the weight of her act sinking in. She'd drawn blood, not to run, but to live. The cave's echoes faded, but danger lingered. "Czech will bring them back," Kolan said, forcing himself upright. "We move now, to the living stone ledge. The Mesa's voice will hide us." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. As they prepared to leave, Kolan paused, glancing at her amulet. "Your mother's truth saved you today," he said. "Keep it close." His words stirred something in Clara, a spark of purpose. If these stories of survival grip you like they do us, hit subscribe and share where you're listening from, she imagined telling others, her story part of a larger tapestry. It helps us bring more tales like this to life. Kolan led her to a hidden passage, narrower than the last, the walls brushing their shoulders. The air grew sharp, carrying the tang of ozone, as if a storm brewed beyond the mesa. Clara's feet ached, but she pushed on, Kolan's steady pace a guide through the dark. The passage opened to a ledge high above the canyon, where the wind howled, and the stones seemed to hum with 100 voices. Kolan's plan was clear. Use the ledge's acoustics to confuse the Rollins brothers. But Clara knew Tsek's wound wouldn't slow him long. The Mesa's heart was both shield and snare, and their fight was far from over. The wind's howl on the living stone ledge carried a chorus of ghostly voices, as if broken Mesa itself sang of battles long past. Clara Hayes stood on the narrow outcrop, her bloodied feet gripping the rough stone, her silver amulet catching the last embers of the 1876 sunset. Kolan, wounded, but unbowed, leaned against a boulder, his blood-soaked shirt clinging to his side, his rifle steady despite the pain etching his face. The Mesa's red cliffs fell away into a 200-foot abyss, and the Rollins brothers, led by the tracker Tsek, were closing in, their boots crunching on the path below. Silas Rollins emerged first, his scar a jagged slash in the twilight, his revolver glinting like a snake's fang. Amos and Caleb flanked him, their rifles raised, while Sek, shoulder bandaged but eyes burning, scanned the ledge with a predator's patience. The brothers had shed their earlier doubt. their faces hard with the certainty of a cornered kill. "No more running, girl," Silas growled, his voice cutting through the wind. "You and your Apache friend end here." Clara's heart thudded, but her hands were steady, her fear forged into something sharper since the cave. Colin shifted, his gaze never leaving Silas, but Clara saw the strain in his jaw, the blood pooling at his feet. The living stone ledge was a trap. Its acoustics could confuse, but its narrow span offered no escape. Czech's lips curled, sensing Colin's weakness. "He's bleeding out," the tracker said, his voice a dry rasp. "Won't last 10 minutes. Clara's stomach twisted, but she stepped in front of Colin, her torn dress flapping in the gusts. "You're wrong," she said, voice clear, defiant. "This Mesa's seen men like you break before." Silas laughed, a low, guttural sound, but his eyes flicked to the amulet, its silver glowing like a star against the darkening sky. "That trinket won't save you," he said, raising his revolver. "No one cares what a woman knows." Clara's fingers tightened around the amulet, her mother's legacy pulsing with purpose. She'd sent a coded message to Larkspur's pastor the night she fled, tucked into the hands of Kyle, the Navajo boy who'd survived the Rollins slaughter. It was a desperate gamble, but she clung to it now. "I sent the real map to Larkspur," she said, her words a blade. "Kill me, and you'll hang by dawn." Doubt flickered in Amos's eyes, but Silas's grin widened, cruel and certain. "You're lying. Ain't no one coming for you." He cocked his revolver, the click loud as a snapping bone. Colin raised his rifle, but his arm trembled, blood dripping faster. Clara's mind raced. Every second bought time, every word a shield. "The pastor knows," she pressed, voice rising. "Cale told him about the Navajo, the spring. Your lies. You can't bury the truth forever." Caleb shifted, uneasy, but Czech spat into the dust. "Enough talk," he snarled, drawing his knife. The wind shifted, carrying a new sound. Hoofbeats, distant but growing, a rumble like thunder rolling up the canyon. Silas froze, his grin faltering. From the shadows below, figures emerged. Not Rollins' men, but a ragged band from Larkspur. Pastor Ezekiel, white beard whipping in the wind, his shotgun steady. Rosa, a Mexican widow with a rifle and eyes like flint. And Kyle, barely 13, clutching a crumpled map, his face etched with grief and fire. They spread out, blocking the path, their weapons glinting in the twilight. Clara's chest swelled, hope surging where despair had rooted. Her message had reached them, Cale's courage carrying it through the night. "You're done, Silas," she said, stepping forward, the amulet blazing against her skin. "The Mesa's spoken." Colin, swaying but resolute, leveled his rifle at Silas's chest. "Justice needs no skin," he said, voice rough but unyielding. "Only those who stand." The words hung heavy, as if the cliffs themselves echoed them. Silas's hand twitched, but Rosa's voice cut through, sharp as a whip. "Drop it, or we drop you." The pastor's shotgun clicked, Cale's small hand steady on a borrowed pistol. Shek cursed, his knife lowering, while Amos and Caleb exchanged glances, their bravado crumbling. Silas's scar pulsed, his eyes darting like a trapped wolf's. But the hoofbeats of more riders, Larkspur's folk, drawn by the boy's tail, sealed his fate. He let his revolver fall, the clatter swallowed by the wind. The Rollins brothers stood, hands raised, as Rosa bound their wrists with rawhide. Kyle stepped forward, his voice breaking but firm. "You killed my family," he said, holding up the real map, its ink stark against the dusk. "Now everyone knows." Clara knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, the amulet warm against her chest. The Mesa's voices faded, but its truth endured, carved in the stone and the blood of those who'd stood. The truth, carved into broken Mesa's stone, lingered as the wind swept away the clatter of the Rollins brothers' defeat, their bound figures fading into the twilight of 1876. Clara Hayes stood on the living stone ledge, her silver amulet warm against her chest, her bloodied feet rooted to the earth. Beside her, Kyle, the Navajo boy, clutched the real map, his young face a map of grief and triumph. Kolan, his side bandaged with Rosa's rawhide, leaned on his rifle, his obsidian eyes scanning the horizon as if the mesa still whispered warnings. Below, Pastor Ezekiel and Rosa herded the Rollins brothers, and Sek toward a waiting wagon, their silhouettes stark against the canyon's red glow. The pastor's voice, rough as gravel, carried a prayer for justice, while Rosa's rifle never wavered, her gaze hard as the desert sun. Cale's small hand brushed Clara's, and she squeezed it, feeling the weight of his loss. His family's bones still lay near the stolen spring, unburied, but no longer forgotten. The mesa, once a place of death, now bore witness to a reckoning, its winds carrying the names of those who'd stood. Clara's choice came sharp and clear in the cooling air. The railroad camp, with its dusty tents and dismissive foremen, held nothing for her now. Her skill as an interpreter had been a tool for others' greed, not her own purpose. She turned to Kolan, his face etched with pain, but alive with the same resolve she felt kindling in her chest. "I'm not going back," she said, voice steady as the stone beneath her. "I want to learn your ways, your people's truth." Kolan's eyes softened, a rare crack in his warrior's mask. "Sahidine's daughter," he said. "You already walk her path." They descended the mesa as stars pierced the sky, joining a Mescalero Apache camp near the river the whites called North, but the Apache named River of Ancient Voices. The camp was a cluster of tipis, their hides painted with symbols that danced in the firelight. Women wove baskets, men sharpened blades, and children darted like minnows, their laughter a soft counterpoint to the river's murmur. Kolan's aunt, Nahue, a healer with hands gnarled as mesquite, greeted Clara with a long look, her eyes tracing the amulet. "No Chi Wii," she named her, she who speaks with wind, honoring Clara's mother and her own emerging role. Days bled into weeks, the camp's rhythms teaching Clara what books never could. Nahue showed her how to grind yucca root for poultices, how to listen to the river's whispers for signs of rain. Clara shared her mother's remedies, willow bark for fever, sage for wounds, bridging worlds as Elizabeth Hayes had done. She learned Apache words, their cadence like the mesa's echoes, and spoke them haltingly, earning nods from the elders. Kyle, adopted by the camp, trailed her, his grief easing as he carved flutes from river reeds, their notes carrying his family's memory. Kolan, healed but restless, took Clara to the mesa's edges at dusk, teaching her to read the land signs, puma tracks in the sand, the swirl of dust signaling a distant storm. "The wind speaks," he said one evening, pointing to a hawk circling above. "It carries truth when men fail." Clara watched the bird, her amulet heavy with her mother's legacy. Sahidin had mediated peace, saving lives with herbs and words. Clara felt that call now, not to fight, but to mend, to ensure no more blood stained the springs. One night, under a moon full as a silver dollar, Clara sat by the river, its voices blending with her thoughts. Kolan joined her, his presence quiet but solid, like the cliffs. "You've changed the mesa's song," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Kyle lives because of you. My people breathe easier." Clara met his gaze, seeing not just a warrior, but a man who'd lipped into danger for a stranger. "You gave me a chance to stand," she said. Their bond, unspoken but deep, was no romance of ballads. It was trust, forged in blood and truth. Years later, travelers swore they saw two figures at dawn, riding Broken Mesa's rim. Clara, her dark blonde braids swinging, the amulet glinting. Colon, his silhouette sharp as a blade. Some called them spirits, guardians of the Nerach Qua Megio, protecting honest wanderers and punishing thieves. Others knew them as Nochi Wi and Walker Between Winds, the woman who spoke truth and the warrior who carved its path. The river's ancient voices carried their tale, whispering to those who listened. Justice, like the Mesa, endures, its roots deeper than stone, its winds eternal. The winds of Broken Mesa carry Clara and Colin's tale, a story of truth forged in blood and stone. What did their journey stir in you? Drop your thoughts below and let us know where you're listening from. Your voice adds to the Mesa's echoes. We're grateful for every moment you spent with us, riding through this rugged tale. Stay tuned for more stories that pulse with the heart of the West. Until we meet again under the desert stars, keep listening, keep sharing, and let the wind carry your stories too.